Wonderful. So I think we'll get started here. Hi, everyone. My name is Spencer Houston from the UNR Extension, and today we're going to give you a little bit of information about the Nevada Youth Wildfire Preparedness Challenge and how you can help Nevada youth participate. So I will just get into it here. Um, So today we're just going to talk through a little bit about the challenge, some common tips about how we can help the students or youth figure out what wildfire preparedness need makes sense for them to address, how they can take their action and submit their project to earn prizes. Um, so why are we doing this youth challenge? And so wildfire does play a really important role in healthy Nevada ecosystems. Wildfire can also be pretty destructive and scary occurrences. However, there are a ton of things that we can actually do to make where we live and the people we live with better prepared for wildfire. The number one goal of this Nevada Youth Wildfire Preparedness Challenge is to have youth feel like they can make a difference in making where they live better prepared for wildfire. I will just add that the extension programs and this one are recipients of federal dollars. And so we want to make sure that this challenge is available and accessible to anyone who wants to participate or any Nevada youth who wants to participate. And so if there's any accommodation or support that we can have to help you participate in this challenge, please reach out to us at livingwithfire.edu or my contact that I'll share at the end of this webinar. I'll also add that the prize money for the prizes being distributed was provided by the Nevada Energy Foundation. All right, so here's kind of the main steps of the challenge and what we'll walk you through today. So there are four pretty simple steps here. You have to make a team. These teams can be any size. We generally recommend at least 3 kids to help share the difference. And we've had groups up to a whole classroom do this. Within each team, we need at least one adult leader who can help shepherd the students through the actual project. And so that's a key piece here. We also need to identify a wildfire preparedness need. We have a ton of information on the Living with Fire website and other publications that I'll go through in just a little bit. The main and most fun part of this is to actually take action to help these youth do something. And then I'll go over some details at the end of this presentation about how you can submit your project and kind of the rules and judging criteria for winning the prizes. Awesome. So once you have your team together with your adult lead, you need to identify some kind of wildfire preparedness needs. And there are four main buckets that I'll talk through of which different wildfire preparedness needs can come into. But I'll just say the projects that we will consider and accept for judging are not limited to any of these. This is just a great place to start. And so the first two are ones that you probably are more familiar with, defensible space and home hardening. Um, we often call these the coupled approach. These are changes that we make to the surrounding area around the house and what the house is constructed to make it more resilient and resistant to fire. Um, then we'll talk a little bit about evacuation planning and some community level actions that we could also do. So defensible space, this is probably the most common and easiest entry point for people to start taking actions around where they live to make it better prepared for wildfire. So defensible space is really just reducing the amount of flammable fuels, whether it's living plants or dead things that could burn, such as like wood or lumber or firewood, or a deck made out of flammable materials. Removing those within around 100 feet of the home. There are 3 defensible space zones. That 0 to 5 foot zone we call the ember resistant zone and is one of the most important defensible space zones. From our experience and observations, looking at how homes are actually lost in fires, it's homes being caught on fire, ignited from embers blowing in front of a storm. Embers are like small flying sparks that catch the home on fire. And so that's where having almost no or as little as possible flammable materials in the 0 to 5 foot zone helps a house or building be more resistant to embers. So this zone is incredibly important, and this is where we want no combustible material, whether they're plants or other things that could be ignited by an ember. The next defensible space zone is this 5 to 30 foot zone where we want things that are lean, clean, and green. And all of these different zones have more information about them on the Living with Fire website, which I'll link to and show you at the end of this presentation, so you don't have to memorize them all here. In this 30 to 100 foot zone, this is where we want to thin trees, have space between shrubs, and other things there that would reduce fire behavior if a fire burned into this area. So this is our defensible space zones. This can look differently depending on the type of ecosystem you're in. Here on the left, we have a sagebrush ecosystem, and on the right, we have kind of more Sierra Nevada pine forested ecosystem. It can also be a little bit different if you're on a steeper slope or a flatter slope. But the main thing is that you understand there's some different defensible space zones and that there are guides on what should be included in each defensible space zone on the livingwithfire.org website. So we try to pair defensible space and home hardening pretty closely because home hardening are changes to the physical construction of a building to make it especially more resistant to embers. We do try to have home hardening make it more resistant to direct flame contact. But as we know, since embers cause more homes to burn during a wildfire than direct flame contact, we think a lot about places where embers might accumulate or could build up and ignite a home on fire. So here's a list of common things where we can make changes to help them be more resistant to embers. And this is a lot of lists. And some of these things can be kind of hard or expensive. We don't expect your group of middle school students to replace a roof, but they might be able to do some smaller things. So a great option here in home hardening could be vents. So we recommend that vents have a screen that's at 1/8 of an inch in mesh size or smaller to prevent flying embers from going into a building and igniting it from the inside during a fire. These are relatively cheap and easy to replace and can be a great entry point into thinking about home hardening. Another piece of home hardening is also maintenance. Sometimes we have pine needles or cheatgrass that build up around these vents or maybe in gutters or other places like that. And removing those annually is a great way to help a building or home be prepared for wildfire. So that's defensible space and home hardening. You can learn more also on the livingwithfire.org website. The next category of things that you could build a project around is evacuation. So evacuating from a fire, even just thinking about evacuating from a fire, can be a pretty scary and intimidating experience. But knowing that you're prepared and having a good plan in place can make this reduce the stress quite a lot. And so on the livingwithfire.org website, under Prepare for Evacuation, there are these 4 different categories of things that you could do, whether it's just sign up for the emergency notifications in your area. So that way you know if your local fire department or public safety organization is issuing an emergency notification, you'll get that and know to evacuate. We have an evacuation checklist. And so a wonderful thing you could do with youth is have them review the evacuation checklist and think about what of these things would they want to bring, whether it's a favorite toy, a stuffed animal, a change of clothes. If they know what they'll need to do, it'll be much less scary if it does have to happen. A great thing you can also do is make a go bag or disaster supplies kit. These are things that you can just grab and go, and just knowing that you have that ready to go and that you'll be able to evacuate safely and quickly offers a lot of peace of mind. There are other things that could take more planning. Maybe if you have pets or people with special needs, those are great things that you can work in a team to plan for to make sure that everything that's unique about their situation, they've thought through and would know how to plan for evacuation. The fourth thing, kind of a group of categories that youth could build a project around, is community level protection. And this really takes these three first elements of defensible space, home hardening, and evacuation planning, and looks at that on a community level. Sometimes we have neighborhoods where homes are pretty close together, and we might not be able to have great defensible space between homes because of how they're situated. And so there it's even more important to make sure that many of the homes in an area have good home hardening or the best defensible space they can have in that area, but then also looking at community level defensible space, things that wrap around other homes, or that you have a community level defensible space plan. This could take a little bit more organizing, but we did just want to share it with you because it's a key area for overcoming some of the constraints of having homes that maybe are on small lots or in areas where there are apartments or other places that have many buildings close together. Um, all right. And so the number one thing here is that the group decides what makes sense for the community that they're trying to protect. So what I often do when I talk with students about this is I'll share some background information about defensible space and home hardening and evacuation planning, and then ask them what do they think is important for where they live. They live in this area, they go out, they look at the trees or the homes or the people who live in an area, and valuing that knowledge that they know about where they live is a great way for them to feel like the actions they're taking are important. This is also an opportunity where you could maybe involve a local fire department for their input. You could ask them, what do you see as some of the big priorities for being prepared for wildfire around where we live? That can be important, but you can also just rely on youth or student perspectives of what they see as important. Um, Another thing is that there are maybe people in your community who could use more help than others, whether it's someone who might not be able to rake pine needles around their house for whatever reason that could be. And that's where these youth could identify someplace they could help an individual or group of people and create a really wonderful project around that kind of community level support. And so I think when we talk about the judging criteria, this is something that we'll circle back to is that you want to pick something that makes sense for your community. So once you have all of that, it's time to take action. This is the fun part. The number one thing that I have here is remember to take before and after photos. That's a key part of the judging, is that if you're raking pine needles, take a picture from before, take a picture from after, take a few photos of the team in action, whatever you think makes sense. And remember that there's no action too small. The number one thing is not to have youth fix all of the wildfire preparedness needs in Nevada. It's that we focus on giving these participants a sense of accomplishment to say, hey, me and my friends did something that will make where we live better prepared for wildfire. Um, and so even if it's raking up pine needles or removing some cheatgrass or talking with a neighbor about an evacuation plan, it's all great, but build it up so they feel like they've done something valuable and important. Because it is important and it is valuable for preparing for wildfire. Um, I will say through this action process, this is where the adult leader should take reasonable common sense for safety. If you're helping kids remove leaves from a gutter, um, making sure that we're doing that in a safe way or that we have permission. We don't want to just go randomly raking pine needles on someone's lawn. Make sure we ask and have those things in place so that everyone can have a safe and productive experience here. Once you have all these things together, we can submit that on the Living with Fire website. I'll show you the form for this in just a moment. It's pretty short, and I'll walk you through some of the pieces that this would come through. I will just share my screen here, and I will just bump this over. All right. So found on the Living with Fire website under Get Involved here, we've got livingwithfire.org, Get Involved, and then the Nevada Youth Wildfire Preparedness Challenge underneath. You can navigate to the Submit a Form under here. So you can give yourself a group name, the primary adult contact email, and then the age group that your team is in. We are judging this based on 3 different age categories: grades kindergarten through 5th, 6th through 8th, 9th through 12th. If you do have a group of kids who span multiple age groups, just take the average of what most kids groups are in. Please do write down the number of youth that participated in that group, because we are judging this based on the number of people. So we'll expect more of a group of 20 kids than we would from a group of 2 kids. We have a couple questions about how you identified where your community could be better prepared, what you did, and then space for you to add a couple photos. And if it makes sense, a brief description of what's going on in the photos so we know that what's actually happening there. And then here's an opportunity for you to submit anything else you want to do for us. These answers can be pretty short, and we'll follow up with any other questions if we have from you. And then you can just push submit here. I will just flip back to my presentation here. All right, so you've taken your action, you submitted to the Living with Fire website. I'll just walk you through a little bit of what the judging will entail, and then we'll have time for any questions. All right, so I already talked about the age group categories. We will have prizes for the first, second, and third place winners of each age group. And so what the judges are really going to look for, like I said earlier, did you address a need in your community? Does what you did fit reasonably with something that could help the area that you're targeting be better prepared for wildfire? We are also judging on inclusivity. How well did you help and support others in being more prepared for wildfire? We want everyone to be able to increase their wildfire preparedness, and this is a place where youth can help make wildfire preparedness more inclusive. And then lastly, the effectiveness in preparing for wildfire. If the youth are able to kind of do defensible space or home hardening projects that are what we know to be more effective and do more of them, that's wonderful. If they still rake up some pine needles, that's great. But maybe there might be more things that could be done to create a stronger project. I'll just add a little bit about the awards and how those logistics work. And so if your team is associated with a tax-exempt organization like a 501c3 or other group, then the full award can just be given tax exempt to that organization. for kind of use on whatever youth-focused mission makes sense. If you aren't affiliated with a tax-exempt organization, that's totally fine. You can still submit. But the way it works is that the adult leader is responsible for those taxes, basically paid from UNR as a independent contractor as those awards. If you have questions about this process, you can reach out to myself or naadmin@unr.edu for help figuring out what that all could mean. For some people, that independent contractor tax burden can be about 20%. If you are an individual and not part of a tax exempt organization, I would highly recommend talking with the youth um, at the beginning to kind of understand that, okay, maybe that if we win $1,000, there will be some taxes that have to be paid on this. And so the youth can just know that they might only have $800 to share between them because of the way taxes work. Again, please reach out to us if you have any other questions. We're happy to help you through this. And lastly, if you do have support, please feel free to reach out to me by email. You have it right here. I'm happy to help, whether it's find a time to talk to you as an adult leader or help find someone who could come talk to your group of youth to help them in coming up with these presentations. With that, that's kind of all of our quick overview on this project for this year. Please feel free to reach out. We're happy to help you support Nevada youth being more involved in preparing for wildfire.